Hello. In this video, we'll show how we could use the CAM Template Designer to create and publish a new template into CAM. We can launch the Template Designer from CAM's Getting Started page and select the repositories view. From here, we'll import our existing Git repository. Simply provide the URL and the necessary credentials to clone it down. We select the repository and we can see all of the history of changes in this repository locally here in the repository view. We'll also create a new branch to do our local work, and we'll check out that branch. We can now see that our Git repository project is available in the Template Designer. From here, we'll create a new project. This will be a CAM project. A CAM project will be initially consisting of several Terraform files, main, outputs, and variables, as well as a CAM variables file. From the diagram, we'll start adding some infrastructure to our template. In this case, we'll add an AWS instance. We can see in the source view that we've added resources and variables, and we're also updating our CAM variables as we go along. We can continue adding infrastructure. In this case, we'll add both a web server and a database server in AWS. Next, we're going to attach these servers to an existing AWS network. In this case, this is going to be our default VPC that's already out in AWS. I'll add that to the diagram and select to connect it to one of our instances. We have a number of choices how to do this. I'm going to choose a data source here. By default, it's going to look up my subnet via the subnet ID. I'd rather look it up with a VPC ID in this case. You can see some of the built-in functionality in the Blueprint Designer where we can dynamically validate HCL syntax and update variables as needed. I'm going to look up my subnet based on a VPC ID and an availability zone ID. I've now defined my data source. I can now connect my other virtual machine to the network and choose to reuse the same data source. The subnet ID property on the instances is now set up to use the output of the data sources. Similarly, I can add some security groups to my instances. Again, I'm going to use a data source to look up an existing security group. I've added variables to help me look this up. I'd like to use the VPC variable that I set up previously, so I can easily use the variable editing tools within the template designer to make this seamless. I have some validation that warns me I have an unused variable, which I can easily clean up. Next, I'd like to add a couple outputs to my template, and we can see that CAM variables, as I add variables and outputs, is being automatically updated. Our CAM project also created a CAM template.json file, so we'll change the template provider setting to say that we're using Amazon EC2. Also, we'll remove the variables for our AWS provider credentials and use those from the CAM Cloud connection. We can see that we have validation that says we now have unused variables that we can clean up. And similarly, we have validation that shows we have a few CAM variables that are out of sync. The synchronize button will help us synchronize our CAM variables with our variables from our Terraform. Next, I can use the CAM variables editing feature to provide some default values for some of my CAM variables. I can set up other properties as well on my CAM variables. I can change these using either the source editor or this built-in graphical editor. I'm going to provide some default values for all of my CAM variables for this template. I'm only showing a few here. We can see the changes that have been made are highlighted in yellow. Now that I've added default values for my CAM variables, I'll need to push my changes into my remote in Git. Selecting the repository view, I see all of the changed files. I can select them and add a commit message, commit the changes, and synchronize, which will push my local branch up to the remote. Now that we've pushed everything to Git, we can publish our CAM template. Selecting our project, we'll see a menu option to publish our CAM template. We'll select GitHub as our repository manager, provide our access token, and select the development branch that we're using. We get a success message back that a new template has been created. So we'll hop over to CAM, see what happened. Looking at the template library, we see we have a new template with a provider setting of Amazon EC2. Our parameters have been successfully imported from our CAM variables that were pushed into Git. So let's go ahead and deploy this template. We'll provide an instance name. We'll use our existing cloud connection from AWS, which is why we deleted the AWS provider variables previously. We have default values for everything else. And after a few minutes, the CAM log file will show that we have a successful deployment of our template with 2 new VMs in AWS. Our inputs and outputs are set up correctly. We have new VMs IP addresses in our outputs. And this concludes the scenario. Thank you.